Around this time of year, the YouTube gardening sphere is alive with videos on fall gardening. Gardeners who live in sane climates begin sowing cool weather veggies in August to take advantage of cooling temperatures in order to squeeze in a crop of greens or maybe broccoli before the deep freeze of winter sets in, assuming, of course, they live in a place that has deep freeze winters. I, however, have not really started my fall garden, except for a few brassica starts I have going under my grow lights. The reason for this is it's still way too hot here in Sacramento for most cool weather vegetables, and we don't really have time to start a second crop of most warm season veggies before the frosts arrive. So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges of growing cool season crops in mostly hot climates like we have here in Sacramento. I'm also going to touch on some of the strategies for fall and winter gardening that have worked for me so far. Now, the primary reason fall gardening is challenging here is we don't really have a fall. And to demonstrate this, we're going to take a look at some historical weather data. Now, don't groan. What did you expect here? I'm a dad in my 40s, so it's pretty much a law that I have to drone on about or complain about the weather at least twice daily. I don't make the rules here, people. So let's get into that a little bit. Here, I'm looking at historical data from the National Weather Service for September of 2021. I chose 2021 as it's an example of a fairly typical year here in Sacramento, whereas 2022 was an exceptionally hot September and 2023 was an exceptionally cool September. As you can see here, we had more than a few days where the daytime temps exceeded 90 degrees and even a neat little stretch of 100s. Now, try to direct sow your fall veggies under such conditions, and you'd better have plenty of free time to do nothing but stand there and make sure your top layer of soil doesn't dry out. Transplant starts of things like brassicas, beets, and greens, and you're just begging for them to bolt or outright die. Conditions get a little bit better in October, but technically temps are still a little too hot for cool season veggies. Broccoli, for example, does best when temps don't exceed 70 degrees, and spinach honestly does best when temps stay in the 50s and 60s. Now, in reality, I do transplant my brassica starts in October every year and direct sow greens, and I'm typically pretty successful. However, some of my spinach did bolt last year in October because it was just hot enough to make that happen. Now, moving into November, you can see most of the month is pretty temperate in terms of daytime highs, mostly in the 60s, a few 50s, and the odd 83-degree day there. However, nights do start to get a little chilly with a smattering of nights in the 30s, and we typically do get our first frost near the end of November, as you can see with that 33-degree night. So with all this in mind, what's the best strategy for growing cool season crops in an almost always hot environment? Well, what's worked for me so far is to start my fall garden of almost exclusively frost-tolerant crops in October and just kind of accept the fact that stuff I plant or transplant into the garden in October might not actually yield anything worth eating until sometime the next spring. Starting plants under grow lights in a climate-controlled building in maybe late August or early September does typically allow us to eat broccoli and spinach with our Thanksgiving dinner. However, going this route incurs additional energy and materials costs. Now, I do mostly bite the bullet and eat those costs. I start my garden indoors under grow lights, as I'm not a huge direct sow fan, though I do direct sow plants that tend to grow quickly, like greens and radishes, or crops like carrots, which really can't be effectively started indoors. Well, we do have really mild winters here in Sacramento. We do get some frosts, no hard freezes, so it's important to choose frost-tolerant vegetables. Beets, carrots, spinach, leaf lettuce, radishes, cauliflower, Swiss chard, and onions can all tolerate overnight temps as low as 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, broccoli, kohlrabi, turnips, and Brussels sprouts can actually tolerate temperatures down as low as 24 degrees Fahrenheit. And that list is by no means a complete and comprehensive list of all available frost and freeze tolerant vegetables available to gardeners. Those are just the ones where I happen to have some seed packets on hand to provide a little visual aid to accompany my rambling. I'll pin a couple of links in the comments that'll go into a little more depth on what frost and freeze tolerant options there are out there. It's also worth noting that the temperature tolerances mentioned earlier are referring to overnight lows, not sustained sub-freezing conditions. So if you are in a place where it's going to be, in a deep freeze for months at a time, unfortunately, there's probably not too much that's going to grow outdoors for you, even if it doesn't go below, say, 26. One of my greatest gardening challenges here in Sacramento are potatoes. So, potatoes thrive in temperatures between 65 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and sustained temperatures in the 90s and 100s will severely hinder tuber production or just kill the plants outright. And unfortunately, unlike the other vegetables mentioned in this video, potatoes are not even remotely frost tolerant. Even a light frost will severely damage or outright kill the plants. It's very rare here in Sacramento that we have a long enough window of time where conditions are ideal for the development of large potato tubers. So my solution is just to stick to quick yielding early season potatoes, such as Yukon Golds, and embrace the fact that most of what I harvest will be small, new potatoes. Now, there are some upsides to this, some silver linings, if you will. New potatoes typically don't require peeling, and they usually only require minimal slicing due to their small size. They're also considered more flavorful by some foodies, and I'm guessing that there's a reason why small new potatoes, or I used to call them boilers growing up in New England, are more per pound than their larger brethren. So moving forward, my approach to growing potatoes here in the Sacramento Valley will be as follows. In September, I'm going to plant out round one of some good chitted seed potatoes and let them grow as long as they will until they're killed off by frost, likely at the end of November, maybe the beginning of December. Whatever small potatoes I get out of that, I'm going to be happy with. They'll be a good delicacy to serve along with Thanksgiving or Christmas. As soon as round one potatoes are out of the ground, I'll plant round two. This will occur sometime in early or mid-December. I probably will have to provide some frost coverage for the plants when they're small, but that's pretty easy. In the first few weeks after they emerge from the ground, they can be effectively covered with the half-gallon starter pots that I have. It's really no big deal. By the time the plants are so big that covering them for frost becomes, a real pain in the ass, most of our frost danger will have passed. So hopefully I can get the second round from November or December all the way through when I start the spring garden, when I plant that out sometime in April or May. That usually will yield me, if I'm planting Yukon Golds, most of the potatoes at that point will be about baseball sized, which, I'm pretty happy with. At this point in the year, I'm honestly beyond tired of always being hot, and I'm eagerly looking forward to crisp, cool days of comfortable fall gardening. As I record this, we're actually moving into yet another stretch of triple-digit temps, and I'm honestly ultra cranky about it. Hopefully this is just kind of summer's death rattle, and this will be the end of it, and we can get some days in the 70s and maybe 80s, but I'm not holding my breath on that. So, until next time, let's hope it all doesn't die.